All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our weekly show. I'm Derek Sabori. I'm here with Mackenzie. Mackenzie, how's your day going?
Doing well, Derek. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And this is our follow-up to our maiden voyage together in our first podcast episode, which dropped last week. So that was really fun. This is our approach at trying to fill these weekly episodes with commentary on the previous weeks, which going forward will be with guests that we bring in from brands, people that are working in sustainability, responsibility, working on the sustainable development goals in their companies or at their brands. You and I will then meet every week, do a little breakdown, talk about news, things that we're finding, commenting on things that either our guests might have mentioned or talked about, or things that we think are happening that are cool that we want people to know about, and things that we're putting in our newsletter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that's noteworthy, anything like you said that's cool. I just want everyone to know what's going on in the space and that there's actually good things happening.
And that's the name of our podcast. Thanks for that good drop. But we're trying, it's just about to bring the good things out, and we're trying to do it while still having a critical eye. This is not meant to gloss over everything and make everything seem like it's great, which is kind of the point of our topic today. We're going to be talking a lot about greenwashing. So our hope or our intention is not to just say, hey, everything is great, only look at the good things. You are responsible to get out there and find out that there are a lot of environmental impacts, social impacts that come along with the products that we make, the services that are provided to us. We want to normalize that conversation and make it a part of your daily routine. But at the same time, we want to highlight the good stories that are going on and know that even though brands are really making a push, nobody's perfect. We can always kind of chop down things that are not good enough. And we'll always talk about that, but we do want to try to highlight the good things. But today we're going to be focusing on greenwashing, right? What are we talking about today, Mackenzie?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Greenpeace's latest fashion report. It's called the Greenwash Danger Zone. And it's ranking, I believe, 14 European brands' private, I guess, standards in a way. It's their private labeling of what they consider, what these brands are considering as sustainable.
So when they put a label on it that says, hey, buy this product, buy this shoe, buy this shirt, because we're saying this has an eco label on it, we're calling it eco, you should buy it, or we're calling ourselves eco, here's a little logo, trust us. Greenpeace is saying, not good enough, right?
Right, exactly. And they list a number of things as to what could be considered good enough, what's best practice, and what is maybe the gold standard.
We'll look at all that. Before we do, though, I want to talk about, you'll comment on this. Every week we put out a newsletter. And I know you brought something up to me today, Mackenzie, that we're almost hitting a milestone because we send a newsletter out every week that has these topics on it. And you always do a nice little explanation. We put more on the blog. We've got a member resource center, et cetera, where we dive even deeper. But what was the milestone that we're excited about right now this week?
The big milestone, and I'm super excited about this. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers for our newsletter.
And for us, that's great. That's, you hear these big crazy numbers, but for us, hey, 2,000, we'll take it. So if you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, we'll put a link down here below. We give you a free 35 things to know guide, a PDF that you can use as a takeaway, because again, we want you to be able to read through this report that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. The Greenpeace, what are they calling it again?
The Greenwash Danger Zone.
The Greenwash Danger Zone. So we want you to be able to read through the Greenwash Danger Zone and be able to sort of keep up, read along, and know what all of these words are in here. You're going to see words like RSL, MRSL, EPR, overproduction, overconsumption, precautionary principle, things that you may or may not be familiar with, but these are just sort of the regular language that is in sustainability reports like this. And we want you to be able to keep up and take the most away from a report like this. So be sure to subscribe to the newsletter. We're excited about that milestone. Speaking of the newsletter, we had a friend of mine. His name is Mike Brown. He's got a small little agency called Impact Grove. Well, I shouldn't say small little. He's just starting it. He's been working in sustainability for a while, so he is out there really promoting the benefits of responsible, triple bottom line, sustainable business, helping with strategy and roadmaps and just kind of getting people to understand the benefits of doing business better. He's a 1% for the Planet member, certified B Corp, part of the American Sustainable Business Network. Check him out over at Impact Grove. But after our newsletter last week, Mackenzie, which you put out every week, it's really great. 3 things you need to know every week. He sent me this note that I think is apropos for what we're going to talk about today. He said, after reading your newsletter, a question came to mind as he read the first segment of it. In our episode last week, we were talking about a few different things. We were talking about Levi's and their Well Thread program. We talked about Vice had an abandoned series talking about communities that have been abandoned after the water in their areas, the lakes dry up. And another one, Mackenzie, what was it? The black pigment dye made out of wood waste?
Yeah, Bio Black TX.
BioBlack TX by Nature Coatings. So we did a nice little breakdown of that with our last conversation. So as Mike read through that, he said, "Hey, as a conscious consumer, is it better for me to buy my next pair of jeans from Levi's Well Thread line to support demand and encourage them to do more with their Well Thread products, or from a smaller brand where their entire line and culture is about sustainability and social impact? Somebody like Unspun or Mud Jeans, Patagonia, Outer Known, somebody like that, somebody we would call a sustainability champion." So I think that's a pretty fair question that I think a lot of people would maybe ask. Mackenzie, what would our favorite reply typically be to a question like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the underswell favorite answer is always it depends. And really, it depends on a number of factors.
It does, and it's not always meant to be sort of a cop out or an easy way to not answer it, but it really does because we have to look at environmental, social impacts at every part of the value chain. So the way I replied to Mike is, of course, I said, "Thanks for tuning into the newsletter. We appreciate that." I said, "But good question." I said, "My answer is yes. Yes to everything," right? I said, "But seriously, all of those brand choices would be excellent from their sustainability or durability perspective. Durability is so important. It's like the low hanging fruit of sustainability. We want products that last. We want companies to make products that last. As consumers, we want to buy them, hold on to them for a long time." I said, "But that said, the most sustainable choice will be from the brand, especially from a list like this that he provided, that suits you best, that makes the item that fits you best and makes you feel the best, so that you'll wear it over and over again for the most amount of times possible." And I told him, and I know, Mackenzie, you're a big fan of the work Levi's is doing. I said, they're doing some really deep work in this space. They have a robust program that rumbles through their entire value network. So I said, I wouldn't hesitate putting them in that same class with those other, like I said, sustainability champions. Based on what you've learned so far and kind of the work that, the research that you're doing, Mackenzie, would you agree with that? Do you think we can put those all together at the same type of brand, or are some of them doing way more work than the others?
Again, the answer is it depends on what type of work you're looking at. There are some brands that are doing really good work with their materials, and other brands are totally focusing on the social impacts. So I know for me as a consumer, I always look at what kind of aligns with my values and also what can I afford, because truthfully, sustainable fashion isn't always affordable. I think you really have to look at, like, A, what can I afford? What isn't going to break the bank? And B, like you said, Derek, what's going to work with me best? Because if we're buying, even if it is sustainable fashion, it could have the best materials, it could be made in the best possible way. But if we only wear it, maybe 5 times, or we wear it for a season and then get rid of it, that's not sustainable. So we need to make sure that we're making the best possible choices for ourselves.
Definitely. And for you as a consumer, as a young consumer, are you shopping around? Are you buying by labels? Are you looking at labels? You're receiving? Are your friends? Maybe that's not a fair question because this is what you do now. But do you get a sense that people are really looking at labels and looking to see if there's that sort of eco or sustainable stamp on things? And are they more confused by these labels, or do you think they understand what they're saying?
Yeah, it's so funny, and it depends, I think, on what demographic you look at. And I know for people my age, at least, again, like you said, for myself, I'm a little biased because I'm around this stuff all the time, but labels are a big thing. I think consumers are becoming more aware of the certifications, whether that be GRS or OCS or maybe even ROC, the regenerative organic cotton stamp. But also, I think a lot of people in my age group we can't afford it. So we have to switch to the secondhand market. So platforms like Depop, going to Goodwill, any of those providers where you can get good quality clothes. You can buy Levi's on Depop, but at a much cheaper price. So some people in my family have come to me, Derek, I'm sure you've experienced this too, like, hey, what does this label mean? Or, hey, I saw that this has 20% organic cotton. Is that good? Is that bad? So yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think my thoughts are the same. It's hard to work through it all. Companies will often put out a small collection or one or two products that maybe have all the sustainability features. But what Greenpeace is doing in this report is really asking them to tell us more, to say, well, how much recycled content have you purchased? How much organic content have you purchased? What percent of your line is this collection, does it make up? So I think those are good questions, and most of us as consumers just won't have the answers. So in fact, just the last couple of days here, there was a big article where there's a class action suit, I guess, against Nike because a consumer in Missouri, I think, here in
I
the
think,
states,
yeah.
her claim was that, hey, Nike is talking about being net zero and having these sustainable features, and her assumption was, I guess, that she bought this product, that she was buying a quote unquote sustainable product, and only to come to find out that that particular one, I think, didn't have the right sustainable materials, I guess, in quotes, that she was hoping for, or enough of them. So I think it's a really interesting time because I know Nike's doing a lot of great work in terms of materials and chemicals and moving the whole kind of movement forward. But at the same time, they're getting called out for using too, I guess, definitive of terms, or maybe duping the customer into feeling like, hey, if you buy this shoe, you are contributing to this. Or maybe on overall they are. And I guess that's where we get stuck. This is a really interesting time because greenwashing, I think, it's not like it was. In the earlier days, years ago, greenwashing was simply, hey, if you're lying or if you can't back it up. Now we're saying greenwashing is actually, sure, you might be using a recycled material, but if it's made of recycled polyester, you're still using plastic, you're still, relying on fossil fuels, you're still contributing to microfiber pollution. So calling recycled more sustainable is a form of greenwashing, according to this big report. And I think that complicates things a lot. What do you think about that? Am I right in that?
Yeah, it definitely complicates things. And I think, like you were saying, all of this has kind of just started coming to the surface. Maybe a year ago, maybe 2021, as we started to see more legislation coming through in the European market. I know that the textile industry is really coming under fire in Europe, and there's a lot of different regulations that are coming into play. So when you get the government involved, things do get more complicated, and we do have to be, policy always has to be definitive, and it has to have a clear cut definition, I guess, of what is okay, what isn't okay. But right now, I think the apparel industry is in this period of transition where, Derek, like you said before, greenwashing was just a flat out lie. And now it's like, well, you are using recycled polyester or PET, but maybe the percentage is low. So it is more complicated than it used to be.
Way more complicated than ever, for sure. And the EU, I think, is definitely cracking down on this with a lot of legislation coming out of the EU, and that's forcing brands to change their behavior here in the US, even if it's not regulation here yet, because they're selling the products there, they're operating in Europe. So we know legislation and policy has an impact for sure. So that's a good point. I want to read this out of the report, of this Greenpeace report, and we'll put the link to it here in the show notes so you can see it. But the Greenwash Danger Zone, there's a great article that they put out on it as well. But they say, while phasing out the use and release of hazardous substances is an absolutely necessary first step, on its own, it's not sufficient. And I'm going to stop there because, Mackenzie, we know that Greenpeace has done a lot of very, very important work on the hazardous substances issue in the textile industry. And you know a little bit about this. It seems like it runs in your blood and your family, right?
It does. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think with Greenpeace going back to 2011 with their detox campaign.
Exactly. The 2011, the detox campaign comes out and really, calls out brands, the big brands, Nike, Adidas, etc., to say, hey, Greenpeace says, we're testing wastewater all throughout the world in different parts of the world, and we're finding hazardous, bioaccumulative, carcinogenic materials or chemicals in wastewater, and we're tracing this wastewater back to factories, and these factories and mills are the places where you're dyeing your fabric, and they're not responsibly handling their wastewater. They challenge these companies, these big companies, to detox their supply chains. And at the time, these companies didn't even know, we didn't really even know how to get around that or get a handle of it. This was a big call out by Greenpeace, and it was really putting accountability on the brands, because up to that point, it was easy for a brand to say, well, that's not our factory. We don't own it. We didn't place it there. We're not really sure. We don't really handle chemicals. And all of a sudden, Greenpeace said, hey, that's not good enough. That's not how we're going to roll. Right. And the article even points out, hey, Greenpeace says, hey, we really believe that there is a timeline, that there is a kind of pre-detox, timeline, and a post-detox campaign. We call that one of our turning points in our history lessons in the course, right?
Right. I was just going to bring that up. I think you call that's turning point number one. I believe it's what you call the unseen. It's, again, this was such a new thing, or I shouldn't say new. It was a rarely talked about topic in the apparel industry because, we can't see these chemicals dumping out of our facilities. But they have these long lasting, really detrimental effects on the environment, on the local communities. So yeah, Derek, like you said, I mean, it was massive when the detox campaign came out. Different consumers were calling for different brands to detox. It really rocked the industry.
It did. And prior to that, we were focused on an RSL, so a restricted substances list. So we might test your finished product to say, hey, we cannot have these hazardous chemicals show up, or substances show up in your finished product. What Greenpeace was saying is that's not good enough. We have to look back all throughout the manufacturing process, not just at tier one where the products are being made or in the finished products, but where they're being processed, where raw materials are being processed, where they're being dyed, and all the subcomponents are being assembled. So we had to look at restricted substances throughout the manufacturing process, and MRSL was put in place. Companies had to start learning how to deal with this. Yeah, and it was a big time. So this piece goes on to say that seriously tackling climate change, the biodiversity crisis, and the protection of oceans requires severely reducing the material intensity of fashion, currently driven by a linear business model that relies on overproduction and the promotion of overconsumption. So what they're saying is, hey, we have to get out of this idea that we can continue at the pace we're going, keep continuing to overproduce. Consumers are over consuming, overbuying, we're underutilizing, we don't use our products for as long. And they really advocate for, despite what other efforts are being made by brands, that brands should be really slowing down the flow of materials, getting the most use out of their materials, slowing down the flow, and closing the loop. What do you think about that, Mackenzie? Do you think that message is resonating at all with anybody? Because it just seems like the industry continues to grow and grow, and consumers want to continue to buy more. But do we even stand a chance at slowing down the flow of materials and possibly closing the loop?
I think the harsh reality is we're a long way from true circularity. I mean, if we go off of the, I guess, blueprint that Ellen MacArthur Foundation has set up, I mean, circularity is really complex, and it does kind of take this. I mean, if we look at maybe a multi-stakeholder approach and maybe a three-prong approach with government, brands, and consumers all working together to push the circular economy forward, I mean, that's like a big overhaul. That's a huge change to the entire industry.
Big thing. And, I see a lot of companies rushing to try to want to be a part of the circular conversation. And we're not quite there. It's not fully scaled. There are a lot of great initiatives, innovations, technologies that are at market, starting to happen. Still a lot of investment that's happening, but there is no full infrastructure built for circularity. And in order for there to be so, there has to be legislation. There has to be, we need collection. We need retailers playing a part. We need consumers being able to know where they can take it back. Fiber blends are still a problem. Typically, most of our products are made of multi-fiber blends. This Greenpeace report calls all of that out. They call out the industry for really relying too heavily on synthetics and polyester specifically, which relies on fossil fuels, which is associated with microfiber pollution. So they're, to your point, really calling for this whole radical shift. A big part of it too, I'm going to pull this up because what they're really trying to do though is, in addition to kind of painting the whole picture, they're saying, hey, we're giving you a scorecard so that you can see how brands are doing when it comes to them marketing their own sustainable products. Whether it's, they've got, and a lot of these are European brands, but you'll recognize some if you're stateside here. H&M, their Conscious brand or collection. They've got Benetton's Green Bee collection. They've got G-Star's Responsible Materials. They go through though and give them an overall rating, and most everybody got really low scores or got a thumbs down. Only two companies, Co-op and VOD, their collections got 2 green thumbs up. But they go through with a whole bunch of things in terms of, is the label that they're using backed by a third party? Is there clear and accessible specification for what qualifies that label? What percent of these products are represented by the label, etc. So it's a really good scorecard to use. But I think most importantly is reading through this 27-page report and getting a sense of all the different things that they are talking about and addressing. Really a lot of good points in here. Mackenzie, what else from this report stood out aside from them giving the thumbs up, thumbs down in our last few minutes here? What do you think the biggest takeaway from your side is when it comes to this report?
I mean, there's so many really big topics that they cover in this report that I think are beneficial, whether you're maybe a young professional in a brand or if you're just a consumer and you're kind of getting a lay of the land and learning the language. I mean, I really think number one thing is just to be educated. I think that's really what this report comes down to is, I mean, you kind of have to know your stuff in today's day and age, like if you're out shopping or if you're designing a product, it's like, we kind of need to know what's going into our products before we can slap a sustainability label on it, or before we can go out and flash our new product and say like, oh, look at this, it's sustainable. It's,
So I think that's a great point. And so whether you are a professional in the space or a consumer, this is what we hope to do. If you want to come to some learning with us, we've got courses that you can go through. We do lectures, workshops, etc. But most importantly, just keep tuning in so that you can continue to learn this language and know why Greenpeace is calling out the industry. If you're working inside of a brand, know that this is a cautionary tale to be really careful with how you're marketing your sustainability initiatives. Be sure definitely to not overhype it, to not put any sort of definitive stamps on it to say this is net zero, this is sustainable, this is responsible. Really, I would just say this is made of recycled content, and here's how we proved it. The EU legislation is asking for traceability on everything, so they touch a lot on traceability in this report. So our hope is just to bring this awareness to you so that you know these are out there. We'll break them down in the newsletter and on the blog, so we'll put the link in there. For now, though, we're going to give you the insights so that you can just get in there. There's too much content to it for us to dive into it today. We want to make these short and just bring it to your attention. Maybe, I don't know, Mackenzie, maybe we'll do a little dive into this report, a little deeper dive, and go into all the details, because whether it is, there's issues with cotton, there's issues with polyester, there's issues with your man-made cellulosics. Even if they are the more sustainable ones, still issues. So as we say, it always depends, because it can be really nuanced. So make sure you're, as Mackenzie said, being educated, being exposed to all of this language. And I don't know, it's a great report. I loved it. I had a great time reading it. Give yourself an hour. That's about all you're going to need to dive in. So Mackenzie, with that, I think that's good enough for this. We can't go too long because we're trying to keep these relatively short, but we have so much to talk about. So that's why we put it on the newsletter and on the blog. What do our readers, our subscribers, what do we look forward to next week? I know you got a couple things that you're working on. Can we give a little hint as to what they can expect in their inbox?
Yeah, well, you already hinted at it, Derek. We're going to be talking about the Nike lawsuit. There's a lot of questions that I have. I think brands are on high alert. So we're going to be diving into that, as well as a few other different stories.
Cool. And I think you're going to give some more insights into this Greenpeace report as well. But check it out. That's the greenwashing danger zone. If you are in a brand, you need to know about this and make sure you're familiarizing yourself with all of the recommendations in here that they've got. Some really good ones. And you guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to go back and check out last week's episode, and be sure to stay tuned. We've got some great interviews with people inside of brands and companies that are doing really good work driving sustainability forward, working on the sustainable development goals. We're talking to companies, nonprofits, a little bit of everybody. So those are coming. Meanwhile, Mackenzie and I are going to be doing these weekly updates to keep you guys informed. So we'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.